My husband lost his memory and completely forgot about me, his 8-month pregnant wife, and reunited with his childhood sweetheart, who also comes from a wealthy family. The two of them were affectionate and loving in public, ignoring everyone else, and even insisted on divorcing me. Relatives and friends advised me to wait until he recovers his memory, saying that he will regret it then. However, I signed the divorce agreement without hesitation because I knew that my husband had never lost his memory at any point. My husband Ethan was in a car accident. His body was largely unharmed, but there was a slight blood clot in his brain. Before I met him, the doctor had warned me that the blood clot could lead to symptoms like dizziness and memory loss with a certain probability, and advised me to be mentally prepared. Therefore, when he woke up and asked me who I was with indifferent eyes, I smiled gently and said, "Ethan, I am your wife Vivian. Do you truly not remember anything?" I gently stroked my pregnant belly, my smile becoming even more tender. "We have been in a relationship for 6 years, married for 2 years, and in another month and a half, our baby will be born. As the father, you must be eagerly anticipating it too." Looking at my protruding belly, a fleeting look of guilt crossed Ethan's eyes, but he still shook his head firmly. "Impossible, Sabrina and I have been childhood sweethearts and innocent playmates. We established our romantic relationship since our first year of high school. How could we allow an outsider like you to come between us?" He turned his head to look at Sabrina and extended his hands to her. "Sabrina, we have always been the most in love, haven't we? Even during this car accident, we were together in the car, enduring the impact together, truly sharing both blessings and hardships." Sabrina smiled somewhat awkwardly, but she still tightly held Ethan's hands. The midday sun shone through the thin gauze curtains, and the fine dust particles dancing in the sunlight enveloped the two who were nestled together, creating a hazy and dreamlike scene that was truly as beautiful as a mural. Just like back in high school, when they would deeply kiss under the sky filled with sunset. At that time, they were being playful, while I quietly read books and did exercises beside them. If a teacher appeared, I would become their tutor, helping them cover up, and this went on for 3 years. I knew very well that I was merely a follower, but I was content with it. Because of my poverty and my parents' preference for sons over daughters, even though I was the top scorer in the city for the middle school entrance exam, I was denied the chance to attend high school. Fortunately, the aristocratic private high school, to maintain its image, specially admitted 10 academically outstanding poor students, offering generous scholarships and promising rewards ranging from tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands after the college entrance exam, which enabled me to continue my studies. Being academically excellent is typically a student's asset, but it is not effective in an aristocratic private school because this is a place where wealth and connections converge. Even the best-performing poor students will only end up working for them in the future. My predicament was imaginable. Faced with the mocking and discriminatory gazes of everyone, I even regretted coming to high school. For a moment, I had the urge to run back home and let my parents sell me to an old man for a high price. But I was fortunate. Sabrina accepted me and permitted me to become her and Ethan's follower. She had said that other girls were too outstanding, and if they kept following her and Ethan, they might seduce Ethan. Whereas someone like me, a lowly poor person, even if beautiful, would at best be a man's pet, and no young master from a wealthy family would genuinely like me. I don't quite recall what I was thinking at that moment. I only remember that she gave me 10,000 yuan, which was the payment for me to be her maid for 3 years. In the eyes of many, 10,000 yuan is trivial, and no one would humble themselves for such a sum. But I would. "Why are you still here?" Ethan frowned, looking very displeased. His voice snapped me back to reality from my reminiscences. I smiled amiably and said, "Then I'll head home first. Please take good care of yourself." Then I also nodded and smiled at Sabrina. "Sabrina, I'll trouble you to take care of things for the next few days." There was a hint of pity in Sabrina's eyes. "Vivian, I'm sorry, Ethan and I have wronged you, but I truly love Ethan too much, I can't be without him. Please leave him, okay?" I silently looked at Ethan. Ethan was staring at my belly, a hesitant expression in his eyes. Sabrina buried her head in his shoulder, her voice choked with sobs. "Ethan, without you, I won't be able to survive. When the car accident occurred, you promised me that you would divorce and marry me. Upon hearing this, the hesitation in Ethan's eyes disappeared, and he said to me coldly, "Vivian, I don't know what has happened between us, but I truly cannot love you. Let's divorce." I felt an urge to laugh. "Sabrina, do you truly love Ethan? Ethan, do you really not remember what has transpired between us?" The turning point in the destinies of the three of us was after the college entrance exam. At that time I was admitted to Peking University as I had hoped, and I also received the 500,000 yuan reward that the school had promised. Although most of it was seized by my parents and younger brother, I finally had a small amount of savings that belonged to me, and I could finally breathe freely in university. Ethan's academic performance was only mediocre, but by taking the route of international programs and indirect strategies, he also succeeded in entering a prestigious university. Only Sabrina, despite having multiple privileges, unfortunately scored only 200 points in the college entrance exam, a score so low it was shocking, and ultimately, she could only go to study in the UK. Initially, Ethan and Sabrina could barely maintain their romantic relationship, engaging in daily video calls to express their love, and every holiday, Ethan would fly directly to the UK. However, as time passed, their youthful passions were stifled by the long-distance separation, and the pride of the privileged prince and princess made them unwilling to compromise with each other, ultimately resulting in a painful breakup. At that time, to provoke Ethan, Sabrina even sent him photos of her in bed with several white men. She said cruelly, "Ethan, stop pretending, your puny body can't satisfy me at all, and I will never love you again." Ethan was so furious that he wanted to go to the UK to kill Sabrina. His pride couldn't tolerate being cuckolded multiple times. His parents were unable to stop him, and it was I who desperately restrained him. He and Sabrina treated me as their lackey, but I regarded them as friends. Because, after all, they had rescued me when I was at my most impoverished and helpless. I just never expected that after all their turmoil, Ethan would choose me to be his girlfriend. I asked him why. I vividly remember the disdainful tone in his response, "Vivian, the person Sabrina despises the most is you. In her eyes, you will always be the most lowly dog. But I deliberately choose to love you, to cherish you. I want her to know that in my heart, she is inferior to you, whom she considers a dog, and I want her to regret it for the rest of her life." Was I sad? I should have been sad. But I nodded and agreed. Because the more I saw of the world, the more I realized that poverty is the most insurmountable chasm, and I needed a springboard with a high starting point. And Ethan was the most accessible springboard. Now that he and Sabrina have reconciled, I have once again become the abandoned dog. It doesn't matter, I have already acquired the money and wealth I most desired, and as for love, I never dared to expect it. During university, the condition for me to agree to be Ethan's girlfriend was 200,000 yuan per month as pocket money. Some might call it money from selling myself, but I don't see it that way, because we were a normal couple. I wasn't a mistress, and he wasn't keeping me. The pocket money was merely a byproduct of our love. The reason I demanded money was to secure a backup plan for myself. My intuition told me that once Sabrina returned, I would be cast aside. Fortunately, Sabrina remained engrossed in the adoration of various handsome men overseas, allowing me to continue earning money through this relationship and using that money to support my ongoing education and self-improvement. With money, I hired a private tutor to improve my awkward English pronunciation, and without the need to go abroad for prestige, I still cultivated a standard London accent that is highly regarded by high society. With money, I hired private tutors to teach me Spanish and French, and during the summer vacation, I convinced Ethan to travel to Europe. The once unsophisticated girl can now effortlessly switch between 3 foreign languages. With money, I attended etiquette classes taught by renowned instructors to enhance my fashion sense and social etiquette. With money, I could also freely befriend my classmates, no longer feeling inferior due to my inability to pay for dining gatherings. As for obtaining a Beijing household registration, it was also part of my plan. Initially, the most secure route for me was to take the postgraduate entrance exam and then the civil service exam, but considering my family who were parasitically dependent on me, I abandoned the path of working within the system. Because once I embarked on that path, I would be subjected to numerous rules and moral constraints, and I would be shackled by my family of origin for the rest of my life. However, I needed the household registration, so leveraging my Peking University degree and Ethan's connections, I joined a public institution, swiftly obtained the Beijing household registration, and then resigned with compensation. It was shameless, but I had no alternative. I wanted to become wealthy quickly and not fear my family's harassment, and the only way was to start my own business. While I was engrossed in entrepreneurship and had made some progress, nearly forgetting that I had a boyfriend named Ethan, he suddenly proposed to me. Graduation season is often breakup season. At that time, although he didn't explicitly break up with me, he left for the UK without a word. I didn't care about his complicated relationship with Sabrina, nor did I know what they experienced later. I only knew that he returned to the country enveloped in gloom and sadness. I thought that Ethan and I had completely parted ways, but he unexpectedly came back. Vivian, even though I still have mixed feelings of love and hate for Sabrina, and even though I don't love you, please marry me. I want to show Sabrina that, if I choose, the woman she once bullied casually can also become a prestigious noblewoman. If you ask me if I was willing to be a substitute, I don't know. It's an indescribable feeling, but it's not exactly unwillingness. Even though I was already quite accomplished and had many suitors, I knew my place. Compared to the Chi family, I was still insignificant, like an ant to a tree. I needed the protection and benefits that come from being under the big tree. I got married in a grand ceremony. Everyone said I had married up to Ethan and envied me for securing a wealthy husband, but only I knew that he was always just my boss. And my in-laws were also my bosses. Confronted with these bosses concealed behind the marriage facade, I naturally exerted every effort to be a virtuous wife and good mother. Only by doing so could I acquire more resources to develop and expand my own enterprise. Beneath the surface of happiness, I had been anticipating the moment of divorce. Particularly after Sabrina's return, I quickly became aware of their unrelenting entanglement. Initially, it was Ethan not coming home at night, and later, it escalated to arguments between Ethan and his family. When he wanted a divorce, the first thing he did was not to tell me, but to consult with his parents. Isn't that laughable? In his eyes, I was always of little importance, not deserving even a moment of his consideration. However, my willingness to divorce does not mean I would meekly forego my interests. I am not a rag for Ethan and Sabrina to use and then casually discard. The only thing that caused Ethan a slight sense of guilt was that I was already pregnant and enduring severe morning sickness day and night. But he had a car accident, so he used the pretext of memory loss to propose divorce, and he felt justified, as if this absolved him from bearing any moral or conscientious guilt. Now that the final uncertainty has been resolved, I can finally sleep peacefully. Ethan kept his promise. Within just 3 days, he presented me with the divorce agreement. With shaking hands, I accepted the agreement, tears welling in my eyes, and gazed at him intently. Ethan, in 6 years, even the coldest stone would have been warmed. Have you truly never fallen in love with me? In your eyes, were my 6 years of dedication nothing but a joke? Was my bearing a child for you just my own wishful thinking? I transitioned from shedding delicate tears to squatting on the ground, weeping inconsolably, like the most pitiable abandoned woman in the world. The sorrowful emotions were pretended, but the tears were genuine. Even though I married him for power and wealth, and even though our nightly intimacies were mere performances, it was nonetheless 6 years of involvement. Ethan reached out a hand, intending to touch my disheveled hair but halted mid-air. Vivian, you have always been the strongest woman, please don't cry like this, okay? I'm sorry, you are truly wonderful, the most competent wife and daughter-in-law in the world, but I have always loved Sabrina more. You know, you have accompanied me for 6 years, but I have also waited for her for 6 years. You wouldn't want me to continue enduring this torment, would you? I despised him inwardly, but outwardly, I continued to weep pitifully. He sighed and retrieved the divorce agreement, and sometime later, had the lawyer bring me a new one. The lawyer regarded me with a wry smile. Miss Vivian is truly impressive. Leveraging the Chi family's influence, your beauty salon has prospered immensely. and yet you can still obtain so much real estate and over 100 million in liquid assets from Ethan. I am in awe. I wiped my tears and sighed. If I had a choice, I would prefer to grow old together. The lawyer shook his head with a smile. No matter how clever a man is, he can't resist a woman's tears. Of course, it indicates that Ethan cares about you, otherwise, no matter how much you cried, he wouldn't have relented, and within half a day, he doubled your compensation. I remained non-committal, simply signing the document with tears flowing. Eyes are so valuable. If not for the sake of interests, why would I use tears to damage my radiant eyes? Throughout, I harbored no grievances against the Chi family or Ethan. Even towards Sabrina, who stole my marriage and my husband, I consistently remained silent. I ended the relationship with dignity and departed calmly. Henceforth, I loved only myself and my soon-to-be-born daughter. Even as I was nearing childbirth, I continued to immerse myself in my career daily, for only my career could provide me with the greatest sense of security. Over the past 2 years, my beauty salon has expanded to 3 locations across the country. Although the number is limited, we cater to the high-end market, serving only noblewomen and celebrities of third-tier status or above, and the revenue is substantial. Having come from an impoverished background, I feared poverty more than anyone, and I wanted to provide the best material conditions for myself and my daughter. Whenever I tallied my increasing assets, my daughter in the womb would joyfully kick my belly, as if she were dancing with me in celebration. I eagerly anticipated her arrival. Finally, on a crisp autumn Saturday morning, my daughter Maya proclaimed her arrival into the world with the most resounding cry. I named her Maya because I had to endure a harsh upbringing due to poverty, and I hoped that she could grow up freely and uninhibitedly because of wealth. I do not seek romantic love, nor do I seek familial love from parents and siblings, but what I yearn for most in my heart is genuine emotion. From now on, there is finally someone in this world whom I can treat with true sincerity. I cradled Maya, and my ex-mother-in-law smiled as she stayed by my side. My ex-mother-in-law smiled and gently held Maya's little hand, saying softly, "Vivian, you have endured much, you are a great contributor to our Chi family." I smiled and replied humbly, "I dare not accept such praise." My ex-mother-in-law sighed, her face showing concern. In the past, when Ethan was deceived by Sabrina and acted foolishly, causing a great commotion and threatening extreme actions, it was you who remained by his side, gradually reforming him with your gentleness, and helped him return to the right path. We had finally hoped that Ethan could start managing some of the company's affairs, but as soon as that woman Sabrina returned, he immediately became infatuated again, spending his days with her in indulgence and recklessness, making it a rare luxury for him to even stay in the country for a few days. Not long ago, when your father fell ill, I urged them to return to the country at once, but Ethan actually chose to stay with Sabrina in France for her birthday celebration instead of coming back to care for his own father. What kind of behavior is this? Earlier, I advised you to be patient and delay the divorce, but you were ultimately too young and couldn't endure it. As a mother, I feel distressed for you and can't bear to see you struggle alone outside. But Vivian, rest assured, your father and I will never allow that woman Sabrina to step into our Chi family's home. Even though our families are of matching status, her reputation is too tarnished, and we cannot afford the disgrace. As I listened to my ex-mother-in-law's incessant complaints, I remained silent. This was the Chi family's internal matter, not something I, an outsider, could remark upon. My ex-mother-in-law suddenly took my hand. "Vivian, come back to live with us, this family needs you and Maya." Go home? The Chi family is not my home, and they don't truly like me as they profess. I recall that when I first began dating Ethan, his parents were strongly opposed to me. I can understand, after all, no parents from a distinguished family would wish for their son to fall in love with a poor Cinderella. I never harbored hopes of gaining their approval. Later, because Ethan was utterly devastated over Sabrina, his parents reluctantly accepted me, but the contempt in their eyes and the sarcasm in their tone remain etched in my memory. Particularly during my first New Year celebration at his home, all the Chi family members gathered, engaging in lively conversation and laughter, but completely disregarded me. Some even attempted to treat me like a servant, intentionally humiliating me. Ethan paid no attention to me, and my ex-in-laws deliberately ignored me. Who could I depend on? Fortunately, I had already mentally prepared myself, enduring the situation with a calm smile, which made it hard for them to be too confrontational. After repeated exclusions and repeatedly tidying up after Ethan's mistakes, they eventually became accustomed to my presence and accepted me as the young madam of the Chi family. I can always face various harassments with a smile, but I won't intentionally degrade myself. I am no longer the ridiculed figure I once was. Why should I return to the Chi family to subject myself to humiliation? Maya's arrival significantly slowed my pace of life. While money is important, spending time with my child is equally crucial, so I allocated more time to be with Maya as she grew. I love my daughter, and my ex-in-laws also adore her. Initially, my ex-mother-in-law wanted to organize a lavish one-month celebration for Maya, but I declined, citing that the child was too young to be exposed to many strangers. It was not until the 100th day that we finally held a 100-day banquet for Maya. I did not invite my biological parents and younger brother, as I had nearly cut off relations with them. I only invited my closest friends and business partners, whereas the Chi family made it a grand event, with all family members and friends in attendance. My ex-in-laws were beaming with joy, gifting Maya a building and a yacht named after her on the spot, which was exceptionally generous. I did not decline, as although Maya is my child, she is also the first grandchild of the Chi family, and these gifts are rightfully hers. Everyone opportunistically flattered and fawned over Maya, a little child who knew nothing. Although Ethan and Sabrina were not originally invited to the 100-day banquet, they still arrived late, hand in hand. Sabrina, elegantly dressed in a white suit, smiled and presented a set of silver ornaments. The child is still young and not ready for real gold and jade, this is most appropriate for her. My ex-mother-in-law didn't even look at her, instructed someone to take the silver ornaments, and then discarded them in the trash. My ex-mother-in-law gazed at Maya with a warm smile. Our Maya is the only child of the Chi family, she must not touch those inferior items. Her words, both directly and indirectly, aimed the term lowly at Sabrina. Sabrina's face paled with anger, but she couldn't explode on the spot, only covertly pinching Ethan's arm forcefully. My ex-mother-in-law smiled and beckoned her son. Is Ethan so overjoyed that he's stunned? What are you standing there for? Come and hold your daughter. Ethan gazed at the adorable little child, feeling somewhat helpless, but his facial expression softened considerably, even revealing a hint of tenderness, which was indeed rare. He lifted his hands and asked me with a smile, she's so tiny, can I hold her? Will I hurt her? I smiled, at over 3 months, she's quite easy to hold. Just don't hold her upright for too long, try to hold her horizontally, as it's better for her spine. Oh, look, Maya is smiling at you, she really likes her daddy. Ethan was also delighted. Maya looks so lovely when she smiles, very much like me when I was young, and the way she blows bubbles is adorable. My ex-mother-in-law added, but Maya is much more well-behaved than you were. When you were a baby, you cried so loudly every day that several nannies were driven to exhaustion, but little Maya is so quiet, with her big, dark eyes smiling, she seems much more blessed than you. We conversed and laughed. An uninformed observer would certainly think we were a happy family. However, this sight became a painful thorn in Sabrina's heart. Disregarding the decorum expected of a young lady from a distinguished family, she hastily approached us and pulled Ethan behind her, as if claiming ownership over him. As she rushed over, I instantly scooped up the child. I would not risk the child's safety. My ex-mother-in-law glared at Sabrina. Our Chi family granddaughter's 100-day banquet is only for family members, what are you doing here? Accustomed to acting recklessly, Sabrina pointed at my ex-mother-in-law's nose and cursed, I am your son's childhood sweetheart and lover, we have been together for more than 10 years. Why can't I be here? In the past, you obviously liked me so much, saying that only I was worthy of being the Chi family's daughter-in-law, and that once I married into the family, I would be like your own daughter. But it's only been a few years, and you have changed so much. Ethan and I are so in love, yet you are trying to separate us. My ex-mother-in-law was so furious that she trembled, she hadn't anticipated that Sabrina would be so brazen as to yell loudly. In her anger, she slapped Ethan. "Look at the kind of woman you have gotten involved with. She hasn't even married into the family, and she's already pointing at me and cursing. If she does marry in, will she not stop until she has ruined us completely?" She then confronted Sabrina aggressively. "I did say those things in the past, but don't you have any idea what you have done since then? Your promiscuity abroad was already disgraceful, and you even injured your uterus and are unable to bear children. Is this how your family raises their daughter?" Sabrina stood her ground, smiling triumphantly. "I may be unable to bear children, but your son also had a vasectomy for my sake. We are meant for each other." Before she could finish speaking, the room fell into dead silence. My ex-father-in-law's chronic illness flared up, and he collapsed heavily. My ex-mother-in-law clutched her chest, on the verge of fainting. My heart was in turmoil, as if struck by an earthquake. Sabrina and Ethan are actually incapable of having children. Heaven is on my side and my daughter's. In high society, people emphasize subtlety and decorum. Even when relationships deteriorate, they seldom engage in public quarrels. However, this time, the Chi and Zhou families made a spectacle of themselves, arguing more boisterously than thugs and shrews in a slum. It was inevitable. The fact that Sabrina was responsible for Ethan's infertility was too grave, and it's understandable that the Chi family couldn't accept it. I simply found it amusing. Sabrina bears responsibility, but Ethan is neither a child nor a fool. His decision to undergo a vasectomy for love was entirely voluntary, and this is a sensational act in the realm of romance. From Sabrina's point of view, she has undoubtedly found a passionately devoted lover. Although women ridicule Sabrina, they are, to some extent, envious, for who wouldn't want to encounter a man who is willing to go to great lengths for them? However, I feel no envy at all, because my daughter and I are already the greatest beneficiaries. Since discovering that Ethan is infertile, my ex-in-laws have been exceptionally warm towards me and my child. When Ethan sought a divorce, my ex-in-laws had attempted to dissuade him and counseled me to be patient, but it was merely a superficial gesture. After all, despite my significant progress over the years, in their eyes, I remain a calculating gold digger from a humble background, not worth them estranging their own son for my sake. Particularly just after we were married, my natal family came to cause a disturbance, throwing tantrums and behaving shamelessly for a small amount of money, creating a very awkward situation. However, I was resolute. Afterward, I had my younger brother severely beaten in secret and threatened them that if they dared to come again, they wouldn't live to see another day. If they stayed quiet, I could still provide them with 100,000 yuan annually, and only then did they have to calm down. Therefore, compared to in-laws like us from impoverished and underdeveloped regions, my ex-in-laws naturally preferred the Zhou family, who were also from a prestigious background. But now, with Sabrina's blatant arrogance as a contrast, I have become the ideal daughter-in-law in their eyes. Their frequent visits to persuade me were acceptable, as each visit also allowed them to spend time with Maya, nurturing the grandparent-grandchild bond, which was beneficial. But surprisingly, after just half a year, Ethan took the initiative to visit me. He was now somewhat slimmer and more mature, with a bewildered and somber look in his eyes, a stark contrast to his former self who was passionately in love. I courteously invited him inside, maintaining my gentle smile. "If you wish to see Maya, I can bring her to the family home for a visit, sparing you the trouble of coming here." Ethan gazed at me in a daze, and after a long pause, he said, "Vivian, let's reconcile." "Yes, let's reconcile. Maya needs a complete family, and we can love her together from now on." Initially, his tone was hesitant, but the second sentence was more resolute, as if he genuinely intended to reconcile. I bowed my head and smiled. "Originally, we married because of Sabrina, and later divorced because of her. Now you want to reconcile. Has she done something again?" "Ethan, we have known each other since our first year of high school. Although you never regarded me as a friend, I was deeply grateful to you, so I willingly dedicated myself to you and the family for these 6 years. Please, in consideration of my devotion, let me go. I won't desperately cling or become hysterical, but I too have a heart, and I have my own emotions and feelings. Please stop treating me as if I were merely a dispensable object. And please do not use Maya as a pretext." Ask yourself honestly, have you been a good father? It was you who expressed the desire for a child, but since Sabrina's return, have you spared a single thought for your daughter? He wronged me, and I have only myself to blame, for when I followed him, I also had my own agenda. But Maya is the daughter he once eagerly anticipated, yet he neglected her for Sabrina. He is unworthy of being a father. I continued to smile, but tears involuntarily welled up, streaming down my cheeks and falling onto the dark floor tiles, creating a misty pattern. Ethan fled in panic. I looked out the window at his retreating figure, a scornful smile on my lips. In my eyes, his utility had become negligible, he was no longer worth sharing a bed with. This time, he came only because Sabrina had fallen out with his parents, and in a fit of anger, she had left for a distant place, so he needed me to heal his wounds again. Thinking about it, Sabrina, regardless of her character, is still the only young lady of the Zhou family. She has the confidence not to serve her in-laws or please her man. She came back because she was tired of the white men overseas, who couldn't give her the romantic and delicate love that only Ethan could provide. But she wouldn't compromise to become a traditional woman who manages the household and serves her in-laws for Ethan's sake, nor does she have the patience to help manage the tedious and uninteresting family business. Proud as she is, she would never wrong herself for anyone. Earlier, when she had a big fight with the Chi family, it wasn't because she loved Ethan so much, but because she felt that a man she could easily have didn't come to her, which hurt her pride. Now that she knows she can't gain anything from confronting the Chi family, it's normal for her to leave. One can only say that they might love each other but are not suitable for each other. Although Ethan is a scumbag, he still has some dignity. After being rejected by me, he didn't bother me again. But my ex-in-laws are not so easy to fool. They finally got rid of Sabrina, so of course, they want to take back Maya's custody. Having me come home is just an incidental. My ex-mother-in-law invited me to seriously discuss this matter, laying out the pros and cons for me to decide. I no longer need to rely on the Chi family's influence, so I smiled and politely declined. Mom, if you want to take Maya's custody, I have no objection at all. After all, she is surnamed Chi, and she is your and Dad's granddaughter. But think about it, Ethan could go crazy for Sabrina, and he might do the same for other women in the future. If that happens again, what do you think Maya will think of her father? Besides, you know my family situation very well. If we remarry, they will inevitably be arrogant and proud. Do you want to see their smug faces? I advised her to think about the benefits of maintaining the status quo and the many shortcomings of forcing a reconciliation. My ex-mother-in-law was also swayed. People, after separation, always think more about the good and less about the bad. In fact, when we were together day after day, there were quite a few conflicts. It's better to keep a distance like now, treating each other as relatives. The Chi family finally stopped mentioning remarriage and changing custody. It's not that they didn't think about leaving me aside and forcibly taking Maya's custody, but I am no longer someone they can bully at will. Not to mention that Ethan and Sabrina's affair has been widely publicized, giving me the upper hand in public opinion. Just mentioning that I have many university alumni and noblewomen as connections, if we really tear each other's faces, even an ant can shake a big tree. Now I have escaped the lowly fate of being bullied and I have finally grown into the person I expected to be. I saw Sabrina again at the Paris Fashion Week 2 years later. She was still dressed glamorously, but even across the runway and the shadowy crowd, I could see the fine lines at the corners of her eyes and the fatigue in her gaze. For noble women who love beauty to the extreme, having fine lines that cause makeup to cake is absolutely unacceptable, but Sabrina was already like this, her makeup not even as good as the models on the runway. Her eyes stared straight at me, with a hint of hatred. I gave her a gentle smile, just like back then. After the show, I left the venue chatting and laughing with several fashion editors, with a few celebrities following behind, always ready with smiles and compliments. Sabrina stopped me. "Vivian, let's talk." I smiled and nodded to my friends, then followed Sabrina into a nearby cafe. Seeing that I remained silent, she finally lost her temper and took the initiative to speak. "Vivian, you are so proud now. Back then, it was just a dog that I bought for 10,000 yuan, but now you have transformed yourself into an upper-class lady. I smiled unchanged. Sabrina, thank you for the 10,000 yuan you gave me back then. As for my current status, it's what I deserve, others have no right to be jealous. Sabrina's eyes were filled with venom. What you deserve? You just got it by stealing your friend's man and sleeping with him, you shameless thing. I clasped my hands on the table and sneered, I don't understand why you hate me. Back then, it was you who pushed Ethan to me, and it was you who stole my husband during my marriage, and it was you who was with my husband day and night when I was 8 months pregnant. In all of this, it's you who have wronged me, yet I have never said a word against you. Sabrina, are you tired of playing with men, or have men tired of playing with you? Why have you become so unable to afford to lose? Regardless of whether I was a person or a dog back then, now I am high above by my own efforts, while you have long been on the decline. Your selfishness has made your parents a laughingstock in the circle, even losing direction in business. Instead of reflecting on yourself, you come to blame me. Is that interesting? Thinking back to high school, why did I choose to be a dog? Because I needed money, and more importantly, I needed safety. Those classmates who were either rich or noble not only mocked and cold-shouldered me, but also played pranks on me for fun. They thought it was a joke, but for me, the recipient, it was blatant bullying. And the leader at that time was Sabrina. She liked to see me in a mess and then grovel to her, and I obediently satisfied her. I was very obedient, so obedient that she lost the desire to challenge me, and that's how I was fortunate enough to become her lackey. How laughable, becoming a lackey was my luck, otherwise I wouldn't have survived those 3 years of high school. I didn't think about revenge, because I know that social rules are not set by me, I can only swim against the current and desperately become stronger. After paying so much dignity, time, and freedom, I finally got it. But Sabrina couldn't even stay in place. What this circle needs most is stability, even if the next generation is incompetent, it's better than messing around. Sabrina should be thankful that her parents have laid a strong foundation, otherwise she would have long lost the qualification to sit and drink coffee with me on an equal footing. But I think the day she is abandoned by the circle is not far away. After returning to the country, Ethan was waiting at the airport. The first thing he said when he saw me was, "Did Sabrina bother you again? She is always so willful, you don't need to indulge her anymore." How ridiculous. Back then, he was Sabrina's most loyal believer, even if she wanted to kill someone, he would hand her the knife and take the blame for her. Just like in high school, whenever Sabrina was unhappy, she would order me around like a dog until I was exhausted, and he would only laugh and hold her on his lap, praising her for doing well, calling her a little son of truth, goodness, and beauty. Skipping the unpleasant past, I smiled brightly, no, we are all friends, just catching up. But she doesn't seem to be doing well, and she still loves you. Ethan, go to Paris to find her, I hope you two can be together smoothly. May you be locked together forever, tormenting each other. Ethan looked at me for a moment, murmuring to himself, Vivian, you are completely different from the timid person you were back then. When you smile, it's like there's a dazzling light around you, very beautiful. It was the first time he complimented me, and it was after the divorce, how absurd. I lowered my eyes and said nothing, I was tired and didn't want to deal with him. Seeing that I didn't speak, Ethan also fell silent and drove. Halfway through, he suddenly spoke again, Vivian, actually, I let go of Sabrina a long time ago. Her love is like poison, I'm afraid, I dare not approach. From now on, can we live a good life together? I know that Sabrina has called him countless times recently, but he hasn't answered any of them, as if he really wants to cut ties completely. This is also one of the reasons why Sabrina hates me, she thinks I stole her Ethan. I smiled faintly, Ethan, when you had the car accident, you and Sabrina weren't arguing in the car, were you? You said her love is like poison, but what you loved was her intense love that could drive people to death, wasn't it? I know that back then, while driving, they were discussing how to force me to divorce, and when they got excited, Sabrina leaned her head on him. They loved each other recklessly, loved each other passionately, loved each other to the point that even when they almost died, they still had no guilt. Sabrina is none of my business, but what about Ethan? He was my husband, the father of my daughter. He is truly disgusting. I also thank him for this disgust, which allowed me to climb up on him without any guilt. Only talking about interests, not emotions, that's the best relationship between Ethan and me. I have my own career, I manage the chief family business that belongs to my daughter, and every day is incredibly happy. Looking at the cute yet slightly willful little treasure, I often recall my childhood experiences. I always remember the nonchalant expressions of my parents at the dinner table when they discussed how much they could sell me for, as if I, their daughter sitting beside them, was just an emotionless object. I tried my best to get rid of them, but I could never get rid of the deep-seated insecurity and fear in my heart. So I crave money, power, everything that can make me stronger. Now that I have a daughter, I realize that only emotions can heal emotional wounds. Every time my daughter smiles sweetly at me, it's the best healing for me. I have stepped over countless thorns to wear this heavy and beautiful crown, and I hope that my daughter and every girl can proudly wear their own crowns. Don't be like me, who once lowered my head to the dust for the crown.